Welcome to Mereba Esset. I am Aster Asgedom from Sweden. With me, I have the one and only Kasech Rayaweyti, an human rights advocate and activist, and the voice of the voiceless from Australia. Kasech, welcome. Please introduce yourself to our viewers. Who is Kasech and your background?
Well, it's Kasech, but it's not my real name, as I've probably said a few times in the past. And obviously because it's of its roots. It was given to me from a girlfriend of mine. I've got a lot of friends in the Tigray community. And actually my first kind of name when I first went to Tigray back in 2012 was Burhan. So my mother-in-law's friends, we were having bunna, like coffee ceremony, and they came and they said, "Oh, we're going to give you a name, Burhan." And my girlfriend, when I got back, said, "No, that's old lady's name." She's like, "That's Hagaresem old lady's name. You can't be that. Your name's Kasech." And I said, "No, I like my name." No, so that's how I came to be called Kasech. And how I got into the community was through friends. I met a few friends outside of the Tigray community, and I really, really wanted to travel. And my children's father was there. He was from Melbourne, and they said, "Why don't you go meet him? He'll take you around Ethiopia and you can see everything." Because I'd traveled South Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, like other areas, but not Ethiopia yet. So we went, and I just fell in love with Tigray. I mean, probably because he was from Tigray. And then I had my two children. We had our two children, and I just got really passionate about learning about their history. I'm really, really strongly in the belief of knowing your identity and knowing where you come from, and being when children are from a mixed background, I think it's really, really important for them to have a solid backing in their identity. And I just happened to fall in love with the culture more than I was already when I was there. So that's how I got into it. And I guess when the war started, I just was like, I love these people. I know a lot about history just from my own personal study. So it's been nearly 10 years, I think, I've been studying and trying to learn about Ethiopia in general, and then Tigray more recently. And then, of course, when you get into history, you kind of look at the current politics. And so when the war started, I just said, I can't keep quiet. Like, I love these people so much. I cannot just keep my mouth shut. If I know something that might encourage people to get up and speak, or might encourage people to, learn more about their history and be as passionate about it as I am, then I will, I don't care. I'll just lay it all out on the table. And that's how I got into all of this. So it was just my passion and love.
Wonderful. It is seen. I wonder, because I grew up in Raya, in the southern part of Tigray. So I was curious, how come you were called Kasech Rayaweyti?
Well, okay, it's another very deep and probably spiritual meaning that people will look at and go, "She's nuts, she's crazy." But we had just been to Lalibela and we were driving to Makala. So we were in a car, a Cobra, I think that's what they call it when they hire the cars. Yeah. And, my partner was like, "Get out of the car." And I said, "No," we were in Macho, and I said, "No, I can't." Like, I just had this really deep connect, like this feeling like I know this place, or this is just, I don't know. It was just some kind of visceral feeling that I just felt so overwhelmed. And I said, I can't get out of the car. He finally got me out, because he's like, "We've still got like 6 hours or 7 hours to drive, whatever, get out." So I got out. I sat there, I was drinking tea with the locals, and I was like, I don't want to leave now. I didn't want to leave. And then 3 or 4 days later, we were in just like a minibus taxi in Mala, and the music was playing, and Raya music started playing, and I just burst into tears. And he's like, "What is this crazy woman? Like, what is she doing?" And I'm like, "I'm so sorry, but where is this music from?" Like, it was just really touching. And he's like, "Well, that place you didn't want to leave and all that kind of stuff." I said, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, that's their like traditional music." And from then on, I've just been obsessed with Raya. Like, I don't know. I've only really ever been there the once, but just the culture, the music, the fashion, the customs, like everything just overwhelms me. And then where I was looking at land there, and I had friends that had a farm there, and they're like, you can have a little place here one day. So I had a big retirement plan and everything. So yeah, it's just beautiful. I think it's the nature, it's just everything. And in that sense, like it's just, it embodies all of Tigray in that one little place. So I just fell in love with it.
Yes, it's a very, very lovely place, and very generous people and very friendly. And
yeah.
Or of course, if you were a Buddhist, you would say maybe I was a Rayan in another life.
Exactly. I mean, who knows? Whatever. Everybody's got different belief systems, and as I got like more into the culture, or like raising my kids and things, they were baptized Orthodox. So we started going to church, and I got really close to the Abba. Like, he's teaching me a lot about stuff, and he just laughs at me and says, who knows? We don't know. Like, we don't know what was there before you could have been. And I just laugh. Yeah, we have a good laugh about it, because maybe if I was a Buddhist, I could have been there.
Yeah. When the last time you were in Tigray?
2017. So we had a plan to go back this year, but obviously everything's happened. So yeah, it hasn't. Well, last year and with COVID, and then this year, everything's happened. So I haven't been for a long time.
When you do start to notice that a war was coming, did you notice a war was coming?
I did. I was probably one of the few people that was really anti-Abiy from the start. But even prior to that, during my last visit, which was 2017, there was a lot of unease and instability in the Oromia region, and I didn't really pay much of attention because we were going straight to Ma'ala, and we were staying there for 3 or 4 months. We stayed there that time, so I didn't really pay much of attention, but I knew that okay, something's not right. And then when Abiy came in, like, I didn't know exactly what was going on because I didn't really ask too many questions. But when Abiy came in and he started preaching love and peace, and holding hands and kumbaya, sitting around the campfire, singing songs and preaching and stuff, I just went, that's not what builds a country. Like, that's beautiful. Like, the essence of building a country can come from having a good heart and a good spirit and a loving, hopeful. But what builds a country is legislation. What builds a country is a culture of politics that is healthy, a democratic culture within a political system. None of this. Like, what builds a culture is a strong economy. I mean, a country is a strong economy, and the culture of a strong economy, I guess, and people having jobs and their rights being heard. Like, all of this kind of stuff just made me go, nah, this guy is just a joke. Like, something strange is happening. And I think it was probably when the Prosperity Party was formed. So the end of 2019, I went, there's got to be a war coming. And then, like, talking to more and more people, discussing the politics, I went, yeah, this is not going to end up soon. By the middle, after the elections, I was certain, like, talking to friends, I'm like, this isn't a matter of if this happens, this is a matter of when this happens, like when it happens, and just praying that it's not going to happen. So yeah, I thought it was happening for a long time, and that it would happen. And that was from an outsider without speaking any Tigrinya or Amharic. So and I know there's other analysts, Western analysts, that have picked it up because they were following it really strongly as well. It just makes me so angry that the rest of the world didn't pick it up.
It's very strange because when you hear the Ethiopians, so-called Ethiopians, and supporters of Abiy and the Amhara nationalists, they all agree on that the reason the war started was because of TPLF attacking the Northern Command. But in a way, they want to just put denial on what was happening before that, because as you said, the war started already 2018 by verbally abuse, by not following the constitution. It's like subtle. It's small things that are banned, that are overruled, and we saw them. But Do you think it's just purposely denying, or they just missed those things that we were looking? You yourself saw them. How is it possible? How do you think it's possible the Ethiopians miss this?
I think he spoke the right language to them. He spoke, Abiy, for all his faults, he's not a stupid person when it comes to selling an image and when it comes to selling himself and making himself look good. My total belief is he's got a narcissistic personality disorder. Like, I've looked into it, the diagnosis. I'm a mental health trained nurse. I know quite a lot about it. And he's very, very good at selling an image, and he's very, very good at denial himself. And I think he sold himself really well because he knew the language that the people wanted to hear. It helps that he can speak multiple languages. You know, he can speak Afan Oromo, he can speak Amharic, he can speak Tigrinya. I'm sure he's got some, you know, little bits of Somali or Afar. You know, there's got to be some other things because he's brought them into his fold so well. And it's not just that. My belief is he coupled up his language with the language of the Ethiopianist media for the last 6 or even 10 years. If you look back into even 2005, when they started coming up against the TPLF and having very strong language about it, very strong language of hegemony, all this kind of propaganda. This propaganda didn't start in Abiy's time. My belief is it started way back in 2005, 2006, just after the elections, after Burhanul Nega gets upset and starts ESAT. All this kind of language has been, like you said, subtly ingrained into the minds of especially the diaspora, that TPLF is the cause, that, you know, and they played as well. I think they were really, really good at this. They played on the trauma that happened to members of the community during the Derg War. So there's no denying that the war was awful and atrocious, and there would have been horrible things that the TPLF had done. It's not because, you know, they're horrible, bad people, but it was a war. So my belief is they played on that trauma as well in Amhara Khalil. So there's no media really in the regional areas. During the time, you have to think about the 1991 to 2005 era. There's no internet. Internet's not like a big thing around the world yet. We don't have social media platforms. So my belief is they played on whatever trauma was going on inside the state. This is just my thinking. It's just a hypothesis, but that, you know, it was easy to sell to the people like that aren't seeing any other media that, oh, all those atrocious things that happened during the Derg time, that was actually the TPLF. So by slowly bringing that, those stepping stones up to a big platform of let's just blame the TPLF for everything, scapegoating everybody else who did wrong, I think that's what's made them miss it. It's not that I don't necessarily think that they just choosing to deny it. They truly believe this because it's been on repeat for such a long time. And then during the whole Oromo protest, they created the whole Oromara alliance, and everybody that I've spoken to beforehand was like, no, Oromo and Amhara will never be real friends because of the historical differences, you know, because of the history that has happened and occurred. But by blaming the TPLF for everything that's happened over 27 years, I think it's just, that's why they've missed it, not necessarily because they really believe that TPLF did this on the Northern Command. I think because they have no proof, but I think just because they've been so conditioned to believe that TPLF is the cause of everything, that there is no question or doubt in their mind that it could be anyone other than the TPLF.
Yeah, it is. You got it. Absolutely. The thing is, the grievance of the Amhara elite came after the 1991. By the way, it's not only 2005. The activists like, what do you call this? Tamang. Tamang Biyen. I don't know if you have heard of him. He organized an demonstration maybe a few days after the TPLF or the alliance took over power in 1991. So it was right from the beginning. It's not because there was atrocities done by TPLF at that time. It was never. The grievance afterwards we can discuss about, but before that, there was no civilians attacked or harmed by TPLF. However, there was now when we see it in hindsight, of course there was. This is about power struggle. The Amhara elites, I want to say, felt entitled to the whole Ethiopia. So some of them don't even back to say that you took the whole Ethiopia from us and gave us a little region. So it was about a power struggle, and coupled with the conflict that the Eritreans, the Ethio-Eritrean War in 1998, the targeting of TPLF, with it even Tigrayans, were by design. It was made purposely, systematically, with the media called ISAT, among others, and even others, purposely finding lies and putting all kind of accusations on TPLF, because in the Eritrean regime side, there is a wish to dismantle Ethiopia because a strong Ethiopia is a threat to Eritrea. Yeah. So if you are going to dismantle Ethiopia, you have to dismantle the EPRDF. If you have to dismantle EPDRF, you have to dismantle TPLF. If you are going to hit TPLF, you have to hit the Tigrayan people. So it was by design, was done since, especially since 2005, as you mentioned it. Before that, also there were signs of the former regime, like Derg regime sympathizers that felt that were not included in the EPDRF system. So one thing led to the other. Many rumors, as you probably have noticed, no one double checks things.
No one.
You tell me, and you are like on my side. I see you as on my side. I don't question anything. I just buy it, and I tell it. When I tell it, it's often exaggerated or manipulated, etc. So now here we are. Every evil that is happening or happened in Ethiopia for the last 30 years, not only are TPLF that are the reason, but also the Tigrayans that are accused of all kind. So now we are here, and what is more hurtful is not that we are in war with a regime. We have been there before. This is not new. By the way, how much do you know about before even Derg?
I mean, I know the basics, the key points, the milestones in the things. When you ask me this soldier or that soldier or this was our hero, no, I haven't got all of that. I've actually got the book, I think, Sweeter Than Honey, the one about the TPLF women. I haven't read it yet. But yeah, I've been meaning to read it. So I know, obviously I understand why it started. I understand, the struggle between the Derg and Haile Selassie, and then the Derg taking over, trying to put in a new regime. So I know the basics, or I know about the war, and I understand the coming into the the formation of the EPRDF. I've looked into the Amhara state and how they became part of the EPRDF. I've looked into as well. The other part that I found really, really fascinating was and it was just a small block that I covered, but I think they were called the Black Lions or something. They wanted to continue on with the Ethiopian Empire. So they were like Haile Selassie's people, and they were fighting. So there is just so much complexities that you can see. And that's what I was talking about, this trauma that has occurred during that time period. And if you don't have accurate media, or like you said, people don't question things and it gets exaggerated. So I often think, how can these countryside people hate so much? Like, the Tagaro people, they've never even met a Tigrayan. Like, how? And that's what I meant. Like, this kind of Chinese whispers, or this kind of, gossip around the, bunna beds, like sitting around drinking coffee and expanding on things that just didn't happen, because it's fascinating. I've got a friend who's mother was Amhara region, traumatized there by her own family, went to Tigray, was saved, you know, like had a beautiful life in Tigray, married a Tagaru, and had, you know, all of her children, and now hates Tagaru because of her community. And you're like, it doesn't make sense. And all I can put it down to is that kind of, I didn't mean to accuse and say the TPLF did horrible things to civilians. I'm just saying like horrible things in that war must have happened, not them accusing them. But, you know, I just try and put myself in their position. Okay, somebody comes into your town. It's the middle of the night. You don't know who it is. They're speaking in a language, you know, so it can be Eritreans as well. They're speaking a language you don't really understand. People are killed. Or, you know, there's battle, it's nighttime. There's no such thing as electricity there. There's no phones. You don't know who it is. And then somebody comes into you when you're vulnerable, you know, like a few years later, still asking for questions. Where's my brother? Where's my mum? You know, all this kind of stuff. It's really easy to just blame that party and blame those people. And that's my belief, like that perhaps this is what's happened during that time, because it just, like you said, it's not from 2005. This is long-standing hatred. It can't have just come from nowhere, you know. So that's my only explanation to it. We went back off topic, but yeah, I just wanted to make it clear. I don't blame like and say they did this and who did this, because we don't know. Like we don't know. I do know for a fact that the TPLF didn't take children. My partner was young during that time. And he's told me he ran all the way from Ma'ala to Desi to join them. And they checked over him. They said, no, you're too young. Go back. You know, so I don't know. I don't know all of the details about the war, but that's one thing that's always stood out for me. Like, I remember him telling me just how desperately he wanted to be part of that struggle. And they clearly just said, you're too young, go home. And he remembers, he's like, I was about 14 or 15. But they checked it, like they looked at him like, you know how young he was. He said they used to do some ear test or something like to get into school and all this kind of stuff. They said, no, you're just too young, go. Like his body wasn't ready for it. So from that, it made it positive to support it now.
Yeah. They are highly disciplined on that matter, because even now they were, you know, many kids have seen their mothers being raped or their sisters being abused and their fathers being killed in front of their eyes. So they just ran away to TDF to join just in a emotional revenge manner. But I saw a couple of films that some soldiers, TDF soldiers, have filmed and shared it on social media, asking these kids, where are you coming? And they were saying that they were going to join TDF, but they were sent back home because they were underage. But about the rumor we mentioned, doctors, Amhara doctors, spreading rumors like TPLF sent cholera virus in envelope to cleanse the Amhara people.
Is this recently or is this one of the old ones?
This was one of the old ones, and actually recent, because it started with this, when they were counting the population, it was 2 million people that were missing from the Amhara. It was, what I later found out was a simple human error. But 5 years later, that 2 million became 7 million. 7 million Amharas were cleansed by TPLF, but yet no evidence. Even if you ask people who talk about this, do you know any family member or someone you know in close by that went through the things you are accusing? So far I haven't met anyone. There was, of course, a documentary that showed, by the way, most of the grievance the Amhara elites talk about was the last 20 or 30 years, not before that. The grievance before that is more on the Tigrayan side, because we have been prosecuting by Mililik. Speaking of Raya was bombed by English-made airplanes during the Haile Selassie time. Only Mekelle was bombed 50 times in a single day. Derg, you probably know what happened during the Derg time. The same thing, like trying to starve us today's like they are doing now. Everything was done. It's just the difference now is we have this technology that makes it very easy and very fast to spread the information so we can get it concentrated. Because at that time, if something happened in Shire, it will take years for people in South Tigray to know about it. Now we know in seconds.
Yeah.
So it is really mind-blowing, but at the same time, I can, at least to the ordinary Amharas, I can understand. They really believe what their elite is telling them, that the Tigrayans are capable of.
Just on that, I remember I just wanted to chat on one rumor that I remember hearing and trying to debunk it with a girl. And we ended up getting to a conclusion that, oh God, it is rubbish. And that was the rumor of the birth control, or that women were being sterilized. And I explained it to her. I was like, how can you blame TPLF just specifically? And she said, because Dr. Tedros was the health minister. And I said, okay, so are you honestly expecting that the one health minister? So I'm like, just think about this. You're an educated person. There's the project, and the project lead, if we look at it from, a perspective of rolling it out, is Dr. Tedros. Okay. So he's given the mandate and said, every state, this is what we are going to, our child mortality rate is so high. Our women's death rate is so high. To bring that down, we need to improve improve child birth control. So yeah, one project of birth control to improve the health of many. And so I spoke to this girl about it, and we discussed. I said, so this is the project lead. Then he hands that to each state, and it's each state's responsibility. Okay, so it's each state's responsibility to roll it out culturally best for their state. Obviously, Afar is a roaming, they're a roaming society. Same with Somali, they're not sedentary. So your states are aware of how to get these programs out. So, and then I said, okay, so then how is this TPLF? And she's like, oh no, but the medication they gave to Amhara, it sterilized them. I said, it's the same medication. If we look about it, I said, you understand you live in the West. What's the medication? It's the depot, some of the options were the depot injection. And that makes you not able to have a baby for sometimes 3-6 months, sometimes up to 5 years, it can work. Mm-hmm. So I said, again, then those projects are then split down into each region, into each health facility. If the healthcare providers aren't providing education to the women, how is that the director at the top's problem? Because he's passed that responsibility down to the states. Then they've passed that down to the Kabbalah. Then they've passed that down to the individual health clinics. If something is being missed along the way, how do you blame the person at the top? I said, that person at the top isn't responsible to going to every single Kabbalah. I said to her, you're talking about 1 million of Kabbala's. You're expecting Dr. Tedros, the one TPLF member in this entire debacle, to go around and check every single health clinic was done correctly. And after we broke it down like that, she was like, oh my God, how can we have been blaming them for all of this? I said, exactly. There is a problem in the system, but if you don't look at it critically and analyze it, you can't, it doesn't make sense to continuously blame TPLF. And, many people get angry at me. Oh, you just support them. Well, it's not, I'm not a politician, but this makes sense as just a project officer. It just logically makes sense. You can't blame the one person on the top for the person who in chain of command, who's, 70 people away from that top person, not educating the woman and telling her that this injection is going to stop you having children. Why? So, our healthcare rates are improved, and so your life is improved. It's just, like you said, there's no questioning in the culture, and it's really sad.
What makes it even very absurd is they never mention the responsible leaders, the Amhara responsible leaders those who are responsible to implement this regulation, whatever the regulation is, the Amhara region leaders are supposed to look into, is it suitable for our region? Is it suitable for, I mean, you have to put into consideration the cultural context, infrastructure and the resources and etc. So if TPLF, or meaning Dr. Tedros in this context, is responsible, specifically planned just to sterilize the Amhara people, that means the Amhara regional leaders are also part of this conspiracy, but they never mention them. They never, they embrace these people, but still point out to TPLF leaders. So that's also what makes you realize, if you think logically, this is not about what's happening in reality. This is just the propaganda, designed, systematic propaganda that even educated people are falling into it. So
it's really sad. It just doesn't make sense. And I think many Westerners wouldn't understand this kind of propaganda is going on. You know, I've spoken to Westerners that have been interested in Ethiopia, have looked up things, and what they see online is often just TPLF propaganda, anti-TPLF. So, and then they don't question that either, because we have in the West we have a culture in the West where we believe the leaders of other countries are telling the truth. We are naive in some fact that we believe that, by we, it's not, I wouldn't say myself anymore, but, you know, in general, that Western leaders believe that other leaders of other countries act with the same level of integrity as them, if they act with integrity, like at least their society expects them to act with integrity. So they don't question it either. So they just say, okay, this is what the new leader is saying, or they think that people with an education, you know, like you said, there's doctors that are falsifying this information, but they don't question the credentials because they judge them based on their standards of what's acceptable. And they say, okay, well, in the West, a doctor is known to be an honest person. You know, they have a scale of the most trustworthy professions. I remember reading it when I was doing nursing study.
Everyone trusts the doctors.
Yeah, and you can trust, that's good. Like, but the thing is, the Westerners don't realize that there is also a culture of falsifying information, and there is also a culture of propaganda, and there is also a culture of just basically lying, like just lying. And it's unfortunate, and they're going to never stand up and they're probably not going to see through this unless they really take the time to deep dive into the society, as I have, because they take it on face value, is what I'm trying to say.
A Swedish ambassador, former Swedish ambassador for Ethiopia, have written a book, and he wrote about how rumors steer Ethiopia. And no one knows who started the rumors. Nobody questions it, but I have never been in a country where it was run by rumors, like Ethiopia, he said.
Yeah.
So that sums it all.
All right. Yeah, there was one story I remember about these 2 million people that just disappeared. And I remember speaking to somebody about it. And I was like, hey, come on. I mean, people don't just disappear. And someone explained to me it was the data beforehand. These 2 million people were basically forcibly made to identify as Amhara. But once the EPRDF gave them the freedom that they don't have to be Amhara, they can be who their parents are, and they're allowed to come out. It came out, this person's story was, or the logic was, that these 2 million people before were forced to be Amhara, but they were given the freedom to be able to identify with who they are. They were actually Oromo. So they were able to say proudly, we are Oromo now. They did not have to identify and fill out the forms as Amhara, because they weren't. Like, they were forced to in the past. They were forced to feel ashamed of who they were. They weren't allowed to speak their language. They were given that freedom to be able to identify with who they are. And it turns out that they were Oromo. So, I mean, it's something that needs to be investigated, but it does make some kind of sense. If 2 million people disappear, but then 2 million people are gained in another region, or they're, 2 million people's ethnicities are declared as Oromo, it's because that's who they were beforehand. They were just ashamed to say it because of the culture that was around the, discrimination of who they were.
I have actually heard of that. It's, of course, we, as always, it needs to be verified. And as I mentioned before, hopefully there will be this committee of investigating what happened in the last 40 years. So hopefully we will verify.
Until you're really deep there in the culture, or you're really deep there on the ground, you don't realize that that's what's going on. Yeah. Like from anyone from the outside, they just look at it and they try and see things online, and they don't realize that this is just, exactly like he said, until you're there, you don't see that this is what's actually going on.
What is new for the past 3 years, however, is the rumors have turned into lies. I mean, from the prime minister to any minister you can think of, they are openly coming out and lying to millions of people, and no one questions that. Even the intellectuals just see it as different types of narrative. They don't call it lie. It's just plainly lie, but they rationalize by saying it's different narrative, which means that you can get away with any lie. And it's not about only you can get away. Some of the journalists, so-called journalists, I don't think I call them journalists, but they are like activists that are paid by the PP regime, and they are like paid to spread a lot of lies. They openly come out and say that they were lying. Yeah. They were creating lies because it was necessary. They rationalize it by saying it was necessary in order to win. So
I haven't heard anything.
It is very, very, very troubling, and I don't know how we will get control of it if that country manages to survive, which I don't think it will. But to come back to our issue, which is Wa'ro.
I get so taken away on a tangent because it actually, for me, it's lovely to be able to speak to another woman about what's going on, because it's a bit isolating here, and I don't being in COVID and stuff, so sorry. I'm enjoying the conversation.
Yeah. So what I wanted us to talk about is I see on your, of course, you are a human rights advocate and also activist on the social media. I have seen you go out in protest in Australia and
just one.
Yeah, I have seen you in front of the parliament. I think you were protesting and among others, stop the rape against the Tigrayan women. And when I go scroll in your on your Facebook page, I see most of your posts are about women in Tigray. What is your take on women in Tigray? How do you see them?
I see them when I hear the stories about the women in the TPLF. And then I hear about how they've played roles in society for centuries. I see them in some way as I don't see them as getting enough respect. But in a funny sense, in the West, okay, I've analyzed it. In the West, we get a lot of respect at home. Like the women are expected to be treated very equally at home, but in public we are sexualized. Our bodies are abused. We are expected to be, the most beautiful and on fleek, or whatever you want to call it. And we're expected to be exposing. And that's what, I find that honestly disrespectful. But when I look at like Tagaro music clips, for example, the women are, how do I explain it? Like respected and loved and cherished in these film clips. That there's that one song, one Shukorina song, and it just, I remember looking at it, and the women are the center stage, and you can tell that they're deeply respected. Like maybe there's issues that happen at home or whatever, but by a society, maybe they're not as voiced, but they are respected. And I take it down to them and the way they hold themselves, the integrity of Rayaweyti, I can't think of the words to explain, but it's it's dignity. The women act with dignity and self-respect, and it's that dignity and self-respect of Tigrawetis that I just fall in love with. It's that old school feminism like that my grandma had. You know, she wasn't afraid to look beautiful, but she knew that she could look beautiful without looking slutty, or, you know, without sexualizing herself. Or she knew to be strong, you didn't have to be quiet, or to be strong, you didn't just, there's something just so illuminating about the Tigrayan women, the Tigrawetis of the world. Like I sound like a diehard fan. It's ridiculous. And there are women the same in other regions of Ethiopia. It's that kind of conservative nature of actually truly embodies feminism, like truly embodies the femininity of what it is that makes me a woman, I believe. So when I think about feminism, or I think about, you know, the kind of woman that I want my daughter to become, it's that image that you see, you know, the strong women, the women who stand up for their families, who love their families, who care for their families, are connected to their sisters and their mothers and their aunties. You know, they take pride in who they are. Like I said, I'm kind of fangirling. Like I just love it about them. It's something that's lost in the world. It really is. Like, from the culture that I grew up in, we are expected to be having intercourse by the time we're 14, you know, like, and that's not just with one, you know, we're expected to have our first kiss by the time we're in high school. We're expected to, I don't know how to explain it, but we're just expected to be less innocent. And that's what makes us strong. And that's not what I see in Tigray. And that's why I stand by the women. But also I see the abuse that's happening right now. And I just, no woman, it doesn't matter, even if you were sleeping around, you know, like a Westerner at the age of 14, should ever, ever, ever go through those rapes and go through the abuse that they've had to go through. No mother should ever have to bury her child. I truly, it just infuriates me, and it makes me want to fight with them, because no mum should ever have to wake up and see her child dead on the ground. You know, I've heard stories of during the Derg time, you know, children being killed and the families having to just walk straight past them, you know. And so these are little girls who had, you know, there's possibility of little girls who had to walk over their dead brother, and now they're a mother and they have to walk over their dead child. It makes me really emotional. Like, these women hold to me, which is something so sovereign to who femininity is, who we are as women, and they are being disrespected like this, you know, like they are being treated like they are less than animals. And I can't stay silent on that. Like, I've got an aura on my friend, and she put it this way. I said to her, you know, you stand up very, very, very openly for Tigray. And she said, because I don't want my kids to ask me when I'm old, why didn't you say anything, mum? And that's exactly how I feel. Like, I might not be doing anything. It's just a drop in the ocean, whatever I say. It's probably not hitting any politician's ears or anyone who can make a difference. But at least I know in myself that I tried my best to stand up for these women when they're being abused by people who are supposed to be on their side. You know, their army is supposed to be protecting them, and they're the ones doing this to them.
Yeah, it is. Actually, we don't really have a word to describe what is happening to Tigrayan women and Tigrayans in general. As you mentioned before, women in Tigray are the fundament of the society. So the aim of attacking them is in systematically to break the fundament of the society. It's not only women who have been attacked to just break this society, also leaders, priests, imams have been killed. And also some of them have said that men over 4-year-old kill them all. And when they were raping the woman, they were telling the intention was for her not to get any children. But what is more hurtful is also that, yes, you mentioned that there is a huge respect for women in Tigray, but at the same time, it's very conservative society. So the women they are not in practice equal. I'm not sure even if there is, of course, in the eyes of the law, they are equal, but traditionally, the culture is somewhat oppressive. But of course, if you see the level of awareness in Ethiopia is different in Tigray. If you compare the level of women's rights and obligations is, I say anyway, according to my opinion, higher in Tigray than in the rest of Ethiopia. So what happened was there was rape cases before the war. There was rape cases, which there is everywhere.
Everywhere in the world. It's not something that's just Tigray, you know. I've seen a lot of people saying, "Oh, this was the culture in the past," and I'm like, this has been, you know, rape is not any, number one, it's never the woman's fault, but two, it's not specific to Tigray. Do you think rape doesn't happen here? I mean, that's just
actually we have a rape case on a weekly basis in Sweden.
There is so much that goes unsaid and unspoken about in our society too. So, you know, nobody's society is perfect. And like, you know, people who are throwing stones in a glass house, they should look into their own backyard and see what's happening to their own sisters and their own daughters. So
what happened was there was young women who are highly educated, who knows their rights. And there was this case of rape where the man who raped was a Warada official, I think, and he was released after just 3 days in jail without any justice given. And these women became outraged. These women, there was a movement called Yohono. It means it's enough, because there was these rape cases that we have been hearing for the past maybe 10 years, but no justice were given. Not necessarily because it was more in Tigray than the rest of the world, but there was awareness. So they went out and make a demonstration. They made demonstrations. The fact they were given permission to demonstrate tell you that there is a whole new way of
it's one step closer. It's one step closer.
Level of awareness and fighting for your rights. And now, as late as yesterday, I heard a new media landscape called, I think, Adebabai. He was the guest there. Were telling these journalists that rape in Tigray before the war was number one in Ethiopia.
It's not. There is many UN studies that I've read. That's not true.
That's also what is hurtful. Not only this, and his evidence was the women were going out and protesting because of that. The other thing is most of the rapes were made by Eritreans, by Eritrean soldiers. The heinous rape was made by Eritrean soldiers. And they are even defending that. The fact they allow a foreign government to come and rape Ethiopian women. Until recently, we were Ethiopian women. They just rationalize it by saying that rape was higher rate than in the rest of Ethiopia.
I'll never forget this study I came across once, and it was about child marriage and the youngest marriage being 14. And I understand that's cultural. And whenever I look at societies and culture, I kind of see where they are on the evolutionary scale. And child marriage at 14, 15 wasn't very uncommon in Eastern Europe. Okay, I have aunties that were married, aunties that are still, you know, my age. So I don't judge where people are in their society. But the child marriage and abduction culture, when I read this, and I was like, this can't be happening in Ethiopia. Like, where is this happening? I remember reading this study. It was Amhara Khalil. So it's very unfair.
Not common we don't have it in Tigray.
The abduction. I remember seeing a movie on it even once, and I was shocked. I'm like, this is part of culture. Like, I'm not going to judge because again, I try not to judge cultures based on that's an individual culture, and that culture will go through an evolutionary process to bring its rights up and to change things. You would hope. But I was just shocked. Like, this is a culture that is actually still practiced, and people are like, yeah, all the time. And then I saw this report and I just thought, and I've heard these, these rumors or these lies and it infuriates me, because it's not something, number one, it's not something that is isolated to Tigray. And exactly like you said, women were respected enough. It's not equal, but they were respected enough to be able to have their voice heard and have their demonstration. And then to use that against them, it's like using a victim's trauma against them to re-traumatize them. That is more inhumane than, not more, it's equally as inhumane as the person committing the rape, because you are laughing at it. Mm-hmm. You are laughing at it. That's just, it's not, I can't even explain it. Like,
they find all kind of excuses than to accept the reality, which is horrible to anybody to believe. Because what happened in Tigray, so far we haven't found a word to describe.
I can't think of an English word. Like, there is no English word I can think of. I don't know in Tigrinya, I don't know in Amharic, but it's heinous. Like, it's heinous. That's
sometimes in my humble mind, in my humbleness, I try to think, okay, what happened is just indescribable, let alone to be blamed by it. It's just on the other side. They allowed for Eritreans to enter the country and abuse us, when in fact the reason we became enemies with Eritrea is to protect Ethiopia, to protect Ethiopians. And they were part of that conflict. Suddenly it's we who are blamed for the whole thing. And they are just...
And it's you who suffered, like, it's not, the rest of the country didn't suffer from that war. It's Tigrayans. Like, it's people in the border towns who are suffering again.
Yeah.
They suffered from that war, and now you're making them suffer again.
That's also the thing. One of the positive part of this war is it suddenly shook us up, because the common denominator since the last 150 years is just this starvation, massacring, and also people were forced to leave their home, because in a time of starvation during the Mililik, for first time Tigrayans left their home and went to Gondar, and they were abused. They were verbally abused because they came poor and hungry. The same thing happened during Haile Selassie. They were starved. They went to Eritrea, and the Eritreans, they were already being told by the colonial power they were better. They were more educated.
What someone put it down is they had a bar of soap and you didn't, and it was just like, what? The colonials told them, because you have soap, you're better? I'm like, I can put you in the mud again if you like. Really? This is just ridiculous.
Yeah, but what happened was when the Tigrayans went poor, dirty and barefoot, it proved them, okay, what the Italians were telling us was true, which led them to many Eritreans appreciate being colonized by Italians. They rather identify themselves on that side than identify themselves with their brothers and sisters. So the red line is always the red thread. The red thread is always we have been starved. We were forced to leave our home, which means we live all over Ethiopia. If you see, you can go in any city in Ethiopia, you will find Tigrayans. They have businesses. They are very hardworking. They always start from scratch and become very, very big, because they are hardworking
to rely on. They have to do it the hard way. Yeah. And then this is what's weird, because then they turn that around. Again, they use the suffering and the success out of suffering as a measure of control. And all you need to do is look back into even prior to Menelik. I've been going back into history. Like, I've gone right back to 1270, and I'm making my way up, the fall of the Zagwe dynasty. all of this oppression of people that were not in that clique, that power clique, is not new. And these ideas of these garrison towns where they will take a town and declare that that's an Ethiopian town, or they'll plant a church there and say, this is Ethiopian, this is in other minorities. Like, it's interesting, when I've been going back in history, I always was of the opinion that Tigray didn't go through this kind of stuff until Menelik. But then I went back a little bit further and I was like, wow, they did. Like, they have been under this oppression for such a long time. And it's just shocking that, like you said, during Menelik, during Haile Selassie, during the Derg, people have had to flee their homes, start from nothing. And now they're saying, that's because of the TPLF. Like, this family, they have their money because the TPLF stole all this money. They gave it just to Tigrayans. I remember this one rumor, like, all Tigrayans had a special pension and the streets were gold lined. And this was literally a former friend from Addis, clearly telling me, when I've been to Ma'ala at this point, I've been to Diridawa, I've been to Harar, I've driven through Amhara Khalil. Like, I never got to Gondar or Bahardar, but I was like, if you just look at, what the other places are, on average, Makala is worse. It is doing worse than Diridawa and Harar. Like, I just was like, okay, you have to go and see it for yourself. I just said to this person, I don't want to talk to you until you go to Tigray and you go to Makala and you tell me yourself, are the streets lined with gold? And are there no homeless people? Because I said to him, I remember giving at least 300-400 birr a day to people in Ma'ala. So I don't know how you can tell me that, they're all living on this pension. And he came back and it was almost like shock. I said, how was Makala? It was so beautiful. I said, did the people want to eat you? No. I said, were there gold-lined streets? No. Was there poverty? Yes. And it was just like, until people see it smack bang there in their face, these lies and this abuse of Tigrayans is just, I don't know when it's going to change, because I just couldn't believe this. Like, this is a person who I thought was really sensible and has given me very sound, wise advice in life. But when it came to rumors or abusing Tagaro, when his best friend is Tagaro, because my partner was Tagaro, it doesn't make sense. I used to be very critical of TPLF because... By the way, that's very important. It's very important for people to hold their government accountable. So
yes,
I don't judge anyone.
So I used to be very critical because I used to believe the design accusations I didn't know were designed. So I used to have reasonable doubts when they were saying that TPLF is looting the country and etc. But now, when I see what's happening, I realize this is not about TPLF. This is just a genocide to wipe out the Tigrayan people. So I start to voice my voice, and they are accusing me of being paid by TPLF.
Oh, I get that one too. I just laugh. I'm like, I have never even met a TPLF member in my entire life. I know one Tagadalit, or two. That's it, who live here. I've never met them. How come I getting paid?
Exactly. That was when I realized, okay, so all the accusations they were telling us, they were just fabricated. If they call me paid cadre of TPLF, God knows what they will call the one who is actually TPLF and in power. So, yes. So I have started to, I just don't believe what they accuse anymore. And I really hope someday, for the sake of going forward, even as a neighbors, that there will be a committee of investigation that will investigate all the accusations that have been put on us for the last 30 years. And the truth will come out, because it's just a matter of time.
I think it's really important, to be honest. I mean, not, as you said, even as neighbors, it doesn't, whatever happens at the end of the day, whether it's federation, confederate, like, you know, again, or confederation, independence is going to take a long time. It's not something that's going to just happen overnight. And then there's going to be a lot that has to be reclaimed and justice to be served. But I think you're exactly right. Like,
it's just something we will see. I don't think independence is like the ultimate end game.
No, because then there's still so much work that needs to be done anyway. But like you said, like, what I would hope for the most is that the judicial system is working with integrity, is working, the penal codes are actually applied. I was so fascinated the other week. I heard Dr. Sergei Arasa he was giving an interview, and he was saying how genocide is actually written, like anti-genocide or punishments for genocide is written in the penal code of Ethiopia. It's not written in many other Western countries because of the fact that we don't think a genocide is going to happen. It's an arrogance on our part. So we have to rely on this, you know, International Criminal Court. And when I heard that, I texted him because I was like, hoping I'll get a response. I was just like, I'm so fascinated that this has happened, because he's like, you've always, and then, you know, I was so glad. I was like, again, starstruck. Oh, I got a response, you know, that impunity, like I've always called for no impunity, like these people need to be punished. But it was just, what fascinated me is the sophistication of that penal code, and the sophistication of the Constitution is actually above many Westerners. And somebody explained to me the banking system is very highly sophisticated. So, you know, I just think it's not then that the systems are not working, like I mentioned earlier, like it's systems and legislation, and it's the culture around the legislation. That is
in the implementation. It is, as always, if the legislator's intention is not in line with the implementer, then it's always failed implementation, because the implementer has another intention and the legislator has another. Also, the level of awareness of the implementer, the so-called street bureaucrats.
That's why I always say as well, like if anything's going to change, the public needs to be aware of what these penal codes are. And like I mentioned, it's healthy for somebody to criticize their government. It's not in our society, that's how we're raised. You have to criticize to get change, you know, and it shouldn't be a punishment to criticize the government. It's a question. It's a reasonable question. And if they can answer it, okay, you back down on your, you know, criticism, and you get the evidence. So it's a cultural change, not just of the implementers, but at the society level too, you know, like people need to be educated what their rights are so they can stand up for them. And I think that's amazing. The movement you were talking about, you know, the women coming out and protesting, that was, like you mentioned, they were educated women. So it's that level of not education on many world things, but of at least your own society will bring about change. And yeah, for anything to change, my belief is that even now, like people need to start educating, you know, the countryside people, what their rights are, what they can demand, what they can't. Like if it's not coming from the top and people aren't learning it at the bottom, this is a recycle. Unfortunately, we've said Menelik, we've said Haile Selassie, we've said the Derg. It repeats until those people on the ground, is my belief, are you know, told about what it is that their systems actually allow for them to get away with, and what it is that they have at their hand as their rights.
You know, one of the reasons we started this platform was just this. We want to create a critical thinking society, a questioning society, a society that questions power. Because that's most of the media in Ethiopia, as you see, are completely controlled by power. So you are either for or against. Many of them don't ask critical questions. There are very, very few, but not many. So one of the reasons we created this platform is just to question. Of course, it's also important to be very constructive, because it's easy to criticize while sitting in West or in the US having a very comfortable life, and the people at the ground are struggling to implement whatever policies and developmental programs are. So it's very important that one is very objective and also constructive. But criticizing or critical thinking is very crucial for the development of a society. So when now we are rounding up our discussion, what I want to ask you about, I'm sure you have noticed that the things that have been done in Tigrayan people at home is affecting not only the people in Tigray, but also the diaspora Tigrayans, especially psychologically, because not only physical abuse, but also psychological warfare is going on by disseminating false narratives and creating fake news. And also the social media makes it very available. So I'm noticing this is hurting the diaspora Tigrayans deeply. What is your advice on that, on how to tackle with this issue? As a nurse, you probably know how to tackle with such crisis.
I do. Like, I know the theories, and putting those theories is always harder to put them into practice. I mean, my own self, whatever I say, I will not be doing for myself, like self-care is really, really, really important. There's things that even after being out of nursing, because I don't practice it anymore, but I started to look more from a holistic perspective. And that's why I didn't practice it, because, a lot of nursing is not holistic. It's really my advice is to look after your whole self, your mind, your body, and your spirit. This is something that I didn't get to touch on why I love Tigray so much. I spoke about the women and their role and their strength, and that ultimately for me comes down to their spiritual faith and their practice. It's not just faith. It's not just oh, I go to church and I put on my Nutella and I go to church. I'm a good Christian. It's not about that. That's how I was brought up as a Christian. I was brought up Catholic. That's what I saw my parents, my grandparents do. It's not that. There is a very strong spiritual faith and connection and spiritual health is known to be very important to us now. Meditation, for example, is known to bring down your neuronal activity. Sorry, I haven't spoken the nursing language for a while, which then de-stresses you. And that form of meditation can be done through prayer. It can be done through religious activity and actually committing to it. But there's other things. Resilience is built by mindfulness, empathy, and kindness, so that empathy of connecting with one another that happens through your spiritual practice as well as your day-to-day. So my advice is really start looking at yourself holistically. And I think people are doing that. And I see the way community groups have been formed and, the formation of this media, everything that is taking care of people's health because it's giving their voice. And, when you express your emotions, I think that's another part of the culture that's not, especially in men, like there is benefits and downsides to having a more masculine kind of society or patriarchal society. One thing is the men that suffer and they don't talk about their emotions. So when you start to connect to people, try and connect on a real level. And that's something that I respect in Tigray. Like that's something I respect in Tigray is that spiritual connection that people have in that community connection, that one-to-oneness that we miss that out in the West. It doesn't mean that you have to lose it now, just because people are living there. Remember what it was like growing up and having your auntie to call or, these kind of, maybe I'm glorifying things a lot, like just from what I see, but my ultimate suggestion is just go back to what you know, like go back to what your roots are, go back to how you were raised, because people cope in traumatic environments after that traumatic experience when there are people who have gone through the same suffering and they're connecting with them, and it's normalized. It's not something that's made to be, you out to be a victim. So many people get resilience and grow, and we're fine. Not necessarily like, of course, everyone's going to have some traumatic experience, but when everybody's gone through that collectively and you're not singled out, and you don't feel like, you have to have a shame for feeling this. I think that's my advice, really. Just go back to your roots. And I hope as Tigray evolves and as women's rights evolve and as things change, the environment changes, that isn't lost. That connection to community, that connection to God, that connection to each other and family isn't lost, because we lost a lot of that in our societies as we moved away from our religions and, moved into more political systems and stuff. My advice is really connect to what you know, because really what Tagaro know on the ground and how you guys live in this with your families is what allows you to be so resilient every single time something like this happens. And it's not something, I pray it's not something that is lost, because it would be such a shame, like to see the culture, yes, change in many ways that are positive, but lose some of those positive aspects as well. Because we used to have that here and we don't have it anymore. So that would be my overall advice. Just connect to what you grew up with.
It was very wise advice. I imagine it would be the same for the victims themselves, because the victims, as you can imagine, are not only women, because their fathers are forced to watch while they've been raped, and some are even forced to rape their own family members. So the whole society in Tigray is also traumatized by that. You can see it by the public meetings that are being now filmed and sent. You can see the deep depression in the public, where people are really feeling. You can feel it's just so heavy atmosphere, even if you are not there. Yeah. So I'm concerned over how are we going to tackle with how are we going to deal with it? How are we going not only how are we going to make the women heal? Not only the women, but even the men on their children and the whole society.
My hope for that is that this atrocious, like this absolutely atrocious acts that have happened to the women and men. Like I speak about women a lot, but I often recognize as well in the West here, we've gotten to a point where our feminism has taken men so far down that they don't feel like they have any roles or anything. And, with men being able to open up and talk about their emotions, it's fantastic, because that's meant that many men have been able to deal with their PTSD from, past, what in the past they would, very deeply suffering. But we've also brought them down to a level where we've taken away their manliness. And I don't think that needs to happen in Tigray, but I hope that because of this experience, the men are able to connect with women on a different level, in a nurturing level, in the roles that men, are allowed to play, to nurture and to care and to heal and to have patience and kindness. Men aren't always brutes and they're not all rapists and they're not all awful. So my hope is that, and my hope is, and it's just a hope, because I can't even speak to Gringa to be able to pass on my message, but allow men to talk to each other. And there's the culture, what is it? Is it Gumaye? Like in Raya, like when they go around and they have this is so healing. Like these connections, like this kind of community connections, like sharing stories with each other. Not hiding it in and being ashamed that this happened or we had to do this, like finding some, God help me, some kind of humor in sharing some stories and, getting through it together, stay connected as well. But then also, like, from the ashes and from the darkness, there is always a way that you can change it to be more beautiful. And I think us on the outside, and I always include myself in it, like I just feel so in love with Tigray. It's our job to heal ourselves and not take their pain as, we're suffering, but they are suffering more than us. So never, ever, ever take for granted how lucky we are to be living in the West. Like, I will never take anything for granted again. ever in my entire life. I can't even connect to Westerners anymore. I just can't, because they cannot understand. I just see so much selfishness, you know. So my advice is, don't fall into that trap of selfishness, so that you can come back and give some hope that they can heal together, because they always have. Like, Tagaro are resilient people. That's why you're still standing. But yeah, like, I often feel like sometimes in therapy and the way that we do mental health care, sometimes we project our sadness onto that person. And, you know, I really don't think it's the right of the diaspora to be projecting their sadness that they felt for this war onto those people, because those people are the ones that need our love and our care and our cherish, you know, they need to be cherished and shown that, you know, they're so important. They're so important no matter what they've gone through. They're the most important people, you know, of our focus. That's what I think.
Absolutely true. I actually call the women Tagadalti, because their body was their body is being used as a battlefield. So they were not fighting with weapon, but they were fighting with their body. So that's why I call them Tagadalti. Also about the Gumaye, it is a spiritual practice, by the way.
Okay.
From the beginning, it's a spiritual practice. So also in Tigray, generally, sometimes you hear the non-Tigrayans see the diaspora Tigrayans dancing in different events, and they are saying people are starving in Tigray, and this diaspora are living comfortably dancing. But when in fact, that's how we show our unity, our resilience, and also there is this word called herane. I don't know what it is called in English, but I think it's like resistance. That's how you show as a society, we are together, we will fight this together, and we will overcome. My last question, as you know, there is a very dire humanitarian crisis taking place right now, because people are being starved by man-made starvation, and it's really hard to believe, because I was there during this starvation in 1985. So I have seen dead mothers, children feeding on their dead mothers' breasts, and people being buried in mass graves because there was too many people to bury in one by one, because dead corpses are very respectful in Tigray. You don't just throw and bury. It's very ceremonial, and it's very important tradition. So when you are forced to use mass grave, that shows you
I've seen the funeral processions. Like, I remember being in Abiyadi and there was a funeral and I didn't know what was going on. I'm thinking, what is the whole community? Like, literally, like, it was about 600 people walking, and someone's like, oh, someone died. I was like, that is so much respect. See, this is the kinds of things we don't have. And I really don't want Tagaro to take this kind of stuff for granted. Like, I want you to see what we had respect of families and communities only 40 years ago, and now I don't even know my neighbor. So sorry. Yeah.
The healing process actually starts with the burial ceremony, not only for those who lost their immediate loved ones, but even for those who come, the whole community.
I've been to Hazan as well, and I think it's such an amazing cultural tradition or religious tradition. I'm not sure where it comes from, but you know, I don't ever take I look at my life and go, this is what I grew up with. I don't take anything for granted, but at the same time, I look at the way they live and I go, this is what we're supposed to be doing. This is how we're supposed to be with each other. We are supposed to grieve with each other and not be separated and, you know, be apart. Like, I look at it and go, oh, I know they'll get through. Like, so long as they stick to it, they'll get through. But yeah.
Yeah, see, it's the whole war thing for us in my generation is traumatizing, because we are living it again, this time more intensively. That's why it gets also very personal and very depressing, because we have been there and we thought we have left it behind us. We have got this test of peace for 30 years and the country got to progress and develop economically in every way for the last 30 years. So it is so disappointing in many ways. But the fact that we are like to ground zero, back to ground zero, that makes you so frustrated, because we finally thought we have figured it out, how to develop, how to fight the poverty and become, if everything went as planned, we were supposed to be middle income country 2025, which is in 4 years' time. So now to think that everything went back to ground zero, not only that, we are witnessing people starve today systematically. What is your take on that?
It's cruel. It's inhumane. And I remember from the 80s, I was only a child, like I was born in late 80s. But even through the 90s, the images of the starving Ethiopians, I did a satire, like a satirical, it was more sarcastic the other day towards my own government, you know, one of my funny phone calls or whatever. But it was, you know, I remember those images, and Aussies have got a really bland sense of humor. Like, we will pick on you and it's a term of endearment. But, you know, so they would call Ethiopians starving Marvins, or, you know, little pot bellies. And it's not meant as a racist thing or anything. It's meant just like, you know, they'll call people with red heads their rangers. Like, it's Aussies are like that. We pick on you to show our love. But I remember those, and that pushed me in a humanitarian kind of position when I was a child. Like, we had always this thing called the 40-hour famine, and it was based on what happened in the famine era. And I think from 6 years old, you're allowed to participate until 10, and you weren't supposed to eat for 8 hours. As you got from 10 older, you're challenged to 20 hours, and then by, you know, teenagers, you're challenged to 40 hours. So this was run through World Vision, and I always remember I did it every year for about 10 years, because I just couldn't understand as a kid, how can people be going through this? Like, I have so much food. Or, like, you know, the other thing, you know, Aussies would always say is, you know, you don't eat your food and there's children starving in Ethiopia. Like, that's what we grew up with hearing. And it's just insane to think that this is happening again, you know, like, this is happening again, and it just shouldn't. It is so preventable. And my suggestion on this is, forget about the governments. To be honest, like, I'm at this point now, I don't believe in protesting, because they don't listen. They know what's going on. My advice, and it's just my personal opinion, like, take it, leave it, I don't care, is aim for the aid organizations, because they have connections to the governments. Aim to them, you know, rally to them, petition to them, change.org, Avaz, like these big things. Aim to them in mass letters. You need to be our voice at the government level, because they don't listen to us. You have connections. And really, at the end of the day, they do. They have the connections to the money. They have the connections to be able to talk to the politicians that we don't have, you know, like that average people don't have. So my suggestion is just a new tactic. I was just thinking about it like a week ago, is to move at them, you know, like getting them to talk for us, because that's meant to be their job. You know, their aid organizations it's meant to be their job, and they should be outraged. You know, teams of the World Food Program all around the world should be outraged that their colleagues are unable to deliver their aid. You know, they should be there for us. And my suggestion at this point is lobby to them, is aim them as our targets, because they need to be the voice. Like, their organizations should step up now and say to the governments, enough is enough. You need to call this a famine, and you need to call this a genocide. Like, they need to be on our sides, because the governments aren't listening, and they won't. Western governments don't listen unless they've got money involved, unless they've got something to gain from it. But it's the aid organizations. They're the ones who should be listening. Like, they're the ones who should be making sure that our governments in the West are hearing the voices of the people that are starving, because they have said so many times, never again. And what are they other than hypocrites if they're not going to actually en masse, you know, lobby for these people? Because and even if they have to be so self-centered, lobby for their colleagues that can't get their job done. You know, there is many different ways we can look at things now, but that's my take on this. It shouldn't be happening. The governments, the one thing that they are not doing is, and I think the only thing that will take Abiy down is mass humiliation. So by calling it a genocide, by actually calling it what it is, you know, weaponized rape, weaponized starvation, genocide, famine, by having the governments call it those things, and I think our next step is having the aid organizations take that lead, then the governments will take that lead. And that's the only thing that will stop him is humiliation. Tedros killed himself. Why? Because he was humiliated. He was about to get captured by the English. He's had narcissistic personality disorder by all means of the, you know, scope of the diagnosis. Abiy will do the same thing, hopefully not commit suicide, because I want justice to be served. But, you know, that's what stops these leaders. Hitler was the same. He wasn't scared of being caught. He was scared of being humiliated on the public stage. You know, so it's these kinds of tactics that we need to play on, I think, to have it stopped and have him stopped, number one, and have them be able to deliver what they need to do. Oh, you've gone mute.
Yeah. My final question will be, you mentioned it already about the genocide, especially the genocide that's happening right now in West Tigray, especially in a town called Humera and surrounding it. I don't know if you have heard a group of men are found tied and massacred and then thrown in the river, which flooded to Sudan, and the Sudanese government is picking the corpse, and of course CNN was there or witness itself that they have seen bodies floating to Sudan. At the same time, I am noticing the diaspora community, which has been the voice of the voiceless in Tigray, are showing a sign of wearing out because the psychological burden has been huge. What advice do you have for us who have been here and trying to be a voice to the people in Tigray?
I'm burnt out too. I mean, and I'm not even out there protesting all the time. And like I said, I don't really think it's a point anymore. I think we've gotten to that point that they know what's going on. They're not doing anything, you know, like they know, they're watching. And I just think it's okay to take a break. Like, honest, I don't know, call me a cop-out, call me weak, whatever. I've taken a break. I deactivate my Facebook accounts every now and then now, just for a few days, because it's too much. It's not, like I said, they are the ones suffering, okay? And what is too much for me is being helpless. Like, I feel helpless. I can't do anything anymore. And, you know, when you need to take a break, take a break. That's part of looking after your whole mental health. Like I said, look after yourself holistically, mentally, physically, and spiritually. And mentally, sometimes you need to just take a break. And, you know, it shouldn't, there's people out there that make others feel guilty for taking a break. And I really condemn that kind of behavior as well. Like, I've seen, you know, some, you know, bigger activists tell people they're not allowed to have fun or celebrate with their family at Christmas or their children's birthday. And that's not fair. That's not going to help anyone. Like, you know, your children don't deserve to be neglected because, you know, of an adult's things that we're going through. So I think try and connect with your families and take breaks when you need to take a break. Because if you don't put your oxygen mask on out here, you know, it's like that saying when you're in the airplane, they say put your oxygen mask on first. You know, if you're going through a divorce or a separation, you look after yourself so you can look after your kids. It's the same thing here. If you don't look after yourselves now, who's going to be there to look after the Tigrayans when we have access to them, when we are able to go there? So if you wear yourself out so much now, you don't celebrate when you can. You don't have to blast it all over social media, but if you don't, you know, do some things that is normal for your life. I know you're split. Your heart and your whole spirit is in Tigray and your body is here and your mind is just everywhere. But if you don't try and connect it here, you're going to be no good for them. So when it's over, when we can go there and we can build their houses, when we can, you know, establish renewable energy resources, we can build schools for them again, we can build clinics. Like, if we're not here now and trying to look after ourselves now, back when this is done, who's going to help them? Because and then they're the ones we need to be there to pull them up. So we have to pull them up and help them. That's our responsibility because we were privileged to be out here. So look after yourselves and take a break.
Yeah.
Becca.
Kasech, I can see now you have gotten a right name of Rayaweyti. I see the fire in you, and the spirit is definitely Rayan. And I'm really happy to have you here as our guest. And it's not, of course, the first. It's not the first time, but we would love to have you in the future also.
I enjoyed this conversation a lot. Thank you.
Yes, I definitely will invite you again, and we will discuss more issues about Tigray, and hopefully even we will soon go in to Tigray after victory.
I'll be there.
Celebrate.
Sleeves up, rolled up, kind of building what I can, helping what I can, I hope.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Our viewers, I hope you enjoyed the discussion as I have. And as always, do not forget to subscribe, like, and share. Until we come with another guest, have a nice day, have a nice evening. Bye.